That's how we own it.
What's good, family? I'm your girl, Tamika D. Mallory.
And it's your boy, Mysonne, the General.
And we are your hosts of Street Politicians, the place where the streets and politics meet. We are in person today.
You know what I'm saying? We back in the office. New year. 2022, we back in style.
Back in style and inside.
We back in style and inside. We doing what we do.
You gotta actually put pants on now.
Yeah,
like
man,
I gotta put my pants on right.
In my boxes. You know what I'm saying? Can't do that.
I put my shirt over my nightgown sometimes, and I go to work. And that's that. But now it's good to be in studio too, and to see the entire Street Politicians team, folks that have been working to make this show the greatest, and it's a good feeling to be at work. Our panel today is probably going to be a deep, long discussion. I'm excited about it. I want to see what you did. You know, what you put this together all by your lonesome.
All by myself.
And I'm excited to get to that. So I don't want us to sit and belabor. There's so much happening in this country. So much happening. There is the debate that's happening over the filibuster being changed so that they could get voting rights passed in Washington. That's actually just started yesterday. There's developments there. There's things happening with COVID-19 and the vaccinations. Looks like Nike has laid off or fired several of their employees who were not vaccinated. So over this past weekend, several people who were not vaccinated have been terminated because the policy went into effect in October that they would have to be vaccinated, and the deadline was January 15th. So you have that happening. You've got kids walking out of schools because they feel unsafe. You've got mayors like our mayor in New York, Eric Adams, saying that the city, the world has to open up. And I actually agree. I don't agree with Eric on all the things, but I do agree with him that the city has to open, the country has to open. Too many people don't have jobs. And by the way, the federal government is not sending all of this money that it was sending in the past. So we got to get people back to work. Yeah. People got to get back to work. Somehow we're not getting rid of COVID. The CDC and others within the federal system, whatever health experts say, we've got to live with COVID the same way we do the flu, the same way we do all these other things that we deal with. And we have to figure out how to work it out. That doesn't mean that I don't understand students who in their schools aren't getting the proper testing equipment, the proper masks, the proper sanitizing, things that they need and support so that they can be well. And they're saying, hell no, because when you say the city has to open up, there also should be mechanisms for dealing with people who have health concerns and challenges. So there's a lot of stuff going on even with that. I mean, there's shootings happening still. I think I saw some, which I don't watch. Your page, I can't. It's too traumatic. Sometimes you have funny stuff on there. Well, you had something on there that I appreciate the other day, which I'll go to that next. But you had something on there about a woman being stabbed or...
Yeah, in the Bronx the other day, 5 a.m, 2 men beat and stabbed a woman. Did
they know her?
It didn't seem like they asked her some questions and just started stabbing her in the back and her torso and beating her and kicking her. It was just, I just don't, like I said, coward culture is at an all-time high. And it seems, I don't know what it is. I've been seeing a lot of this in the Bronx where men are just really assaulting, stabbing, cutting, beating, trying to rob women. And I think, as men, we have to do a lot. We have to do a lot of work to take back our communities, man. People can't feel comfortable. Like, we have to make those type of people feel like, we can't even be seen out here. We got to protect our communities, man. I think it's time that we definitely got to step up and just be those stalwarts in our community that protect our women and children.
But it's not just in the Bronx, although the Bronx has really been wilding. Like, and it's crazy because I tell people I live in the Bronx and they look at me like, and I mean around the world. Think about
because it's poverty too. Poverty. Well, we have the highest poverty rate.
Right, in the state of New York. I don't know because upstate is pretty bad.
I'm just saying that's what they said. I just read where they said that it's the poorest borough.
Well, yeah, I mean maybe, but I'm just saying maybe they're talking about in the city.
Yeah.
Because in the state of New York, upstate, there's some places that it's really,
I would have to look into that, but I know
really bad. So I guess maybe in the city, but nonetheless, it's not just there, because we just went to a vigil last week for a young girl who was working at Burger King, and the man went in there and asked her to give the money. She gave everything that was in the register, and he still shot her to death. So it's like it's never ending. It's all across, not just the city. It's all across the nation. We have to travel this weekend to Las Vegas, where there's violence happening. We're hearing that. I was saying, well, the organizers we're working with, I said, well, can we go to the hood and have our event there? And I was trying to work it out. And she was like, oh no, the shootings are not just happening in the hood. It's on the Strip. It's in just the regular mall, anywhere. It's anywhere, and it doesn't make sense. It's not all gang related. It's just violence. It's breaking out everywhere. And so, it's a lot happening. And I think, and we spend a lot of time focused on Soulja Boy's pictures were released, and, we won't talk about that on this show, but whew, honey. But anyway, that happens, and then Kodak Black gets a lap dance or whatever, twerk dance, and the thing, and this happened, that happened, and we're really focused on that. You see the comment section light up, and I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm saying there still needs to be joy. There still needs to be things to take your mind off the trauma. But when somebody's talking about voting rights or talking about other things that matter, there are less people engaged. I'm, again, not trying to take away folks' ability to enjoy and to take their mind off all these other crises, but we have to be equally engaged, because guess what? Our opponents, the people who work against us, they are methodical, strategic, they are relentless, they are patient, they spend their money together. I mean, these folks are very, very much so invested in their lives, their world, and the world that they want to see. They're building it. They're fighting for it. Now, and then that brings me to the money conversation and what was on your page that I did appreciate. This Kyrie Irving piece. Now, all of a sudden, well, maybe he can play in New York if we are willing to pay a fine.
But that's always, the thing about it is that's always been, the mandates were about fines. Because if you didn't follow the mandate, then there was a fine. You had to pay $1,000, then another $1,000, then $2,000, then ultimately it was $5,000 every time. So like,
and they got the money.
For me, it's like, why wouldn't they let him do that anyway? Because if he's testing and he doesn't have COVID and he's playing their games anyway, there are different teams and it's not the mandate of the NBA anyway. The whole NBA doesn't have a mandate.
Right.
It's just certain cities
which would make
and
a
states.
Difference.
Exactly. Certain states have mandates. So there are NBA players who are just not vaccinated anyway. And they all have to go through the same protocol anyway. Whether you vaccinated or not, you still have to take the test. You still have to clear. If you catch COVID, you go on the COVID protocol. So if he's still doing that and he's willing to pay the fines and he's not coming to the game of COVID, like, I don't understand the whole big thing about it.
But for me, it's like it goes along with everything else in a capitalist society that we will sit and say, this is being forced on some folks, but these people, long as they got the money, they can pay their way out of whatever is being forced on the rest of society. I was watching, I watch several shows. Sanford and Sons, one of my big shows. I watch it all the time, love it. I also watch The Golden Girls, and I watch the Andy Griffith Show, and a few others. Good Times, and was it the Jeffersons? Because there was the Jeffersons cartoon, and then the Jeffersons the show, right?
Yeah, I don't know about the Jeffersons cartoon.
I'm talking about we're moving on up.
That's the show.
But there was the Jeffersons. No, it was the Jetsons. Okay, so the Jeffersons.
Lord,
show.
I was confused.
So
the Jeffersons had a cartoon.
No. So I watched those shows. But I watched the Andy Griffith Show. It's one of my favorites. And in the show, Barney gave not Opie. It's one of the guys. I can't remember his name, but he works in the car. He fixes the cars. Anyway, gave him a ticket for making a U-turn in an illegal U-turn. So he gave him a ticket, and it was a whole thing. And Barney said, I'll give it to my child. I'll give it to my mother. You know, Barney. He's like, anybody could get it. So they said, okay. And Barney goes on about his business. So one day, Barney's pulling out of the station, and he makes an illegal U-turn. And the whole town runs up to Barney, led by this guy, saying, citizens arrest, citizens arrest, citizens arrest. You got to write yourself a ticket. You gotta pay because you were not going to an emergency and you made an illegal turn, and the rules don't change for you. So while these shows were funny, but it does represent a particular point. Because, of course, Barney quit his job. He sat in the cell, locked himself in the jail. You know, he was super, super dramatic, right? But it did make the point, and Andy told him, you told folks that this was the rules. So how do the rules all of a sudden change when it comes to you? Of course it changes because Kyrie is helping them win games. So now all of a sudden there's the mandate we can shift.
But I think it's a plethora of things, right? It's Kyrie is helping them win games as we move along in our knowledge of what COVID is and the possibility of eliminating it, how it spreads, right. People who actually still have the vaccine getting it, and realizing that it's still the same protocol. So when you start realizing, and that's why Kyrie came back, because now if you look in the NBA, you have a bunch of people who have 10-day contracts because everybody's on the COVID protocol. Right. This person got COVID, so he got to sit out. So now they don't even have players. So everybody's still dealing with the same thing. It's not like you eliminated anything. So what they realize is, well, whether you vaccinated or not, if you don't have COVID and you're tested, you know, what is going to be the difference between the people who do have a vaccine or not? Because they're still coming up with with COVID, and they still got to go through the same protocol. So when you really think about it, does it really make sense that you stop him from playing, especially if he's still going through the same protocol? He's still taking the test. He's going through all the things. If he doesn't have it, he's already had it. He went through the COVID protocol, came back.
I think the biggest point that you made on this is that the NBA does not have an official vaccination policy. So regardless of whether you agree or not, because you're going to have some people say, well, unvaccinated people create mutations, this and that. You're going to have all of these different discussions and arguments. But the bottom line is there is no official mandate that the NBA has. A lot of it has to do with the fact that you have states with governors and probably owners who are not vaccinated themselves, and even if they are, they don't believe in it. They are blocking vaccinations or whatever. So it's very political, and at the end of the day, the NBA wants to make money and they want to win. People want to win games. So that's it. That's what it comes down to. And just like Barney, the rules got to be the rules. Right, so
but the thing is, it was never a rule.
But that's what I'm saying. Okay, the rules have to be the rules. If there is no vaccination policy, then you can't go say this one man has to be forced to do it. And if he doesn't, and if you do force him to do it, he has the right to say, "I'm walking away." Right. Mm-hmm. So there's that. So look, I'm just gonna go real quick through this particular point because I know what we're talking about, and we've been preparing all weekend, for this discussion. Today with these incredible men, leaders, and just, thought leaders and everything, just incredible men. And so, as we're preparing and thinking through what we would talk about, I happen to be in a conversation. Sundays is dinner at my mom and dad's house. My family members, a few of them come, uncle, aunt, my brother, every Sunday. And so we're sitting just talking and talking about life and, different things. And casually, my brother says, yeah, I did 5 years, 60 months, he says, in solitary confinement. And I'm like, what? Like, first of all, I did my brother's bid. He'll tell you, I did all his bids since I think, I don't remember when it first started, but even at 5 and 6 years old, I knew he was going to call on the phone. So because, the phone was busy. There was no call waiting, right? So I was the one like, hey,
Get off
6
the
o'clock,
phone.
6 o'clock, Derek. So that's doing a bid with somebody. When you concerned about when they call, I was concerned about his box being, by the time I got to 10 and 12, I was going in the grocery store with my parents like, he needs these little shrimps, he needs this can of this and the tuna and whatever it was. I have been involved in every part. But then I became a teenager and I started hanging in the street, so I must have missed 5 years of when he was in solitary confinement.
Probably.
I can't believe that happened to him. And my thought of the day today, because I see things about my brother. While he's wonderful, he's calmed down, he getting to be an old man now. But I see things about him that, and I don't mean in the, because he's younger than some of these young cats physically and all of that. But he's getting to be an old man now, which is a good thing, right? I wonder what kind of world we would be in if there was mental health support, like mandatory therapy for people who are coming out of prison, especially if they were in solitary confinement. Just the same way that it should be for our veterans and others who've gone through traumatic experiences. If we want to live in a world where people where the recidivism rate is reduced, right? What if everybody had to go to get mental health support? What if we lived, like, if America was that? How much better would our world be?
It would be way better, man. A lot of us are dealing with, especially coming from prison, when you talk about that, being incarcerated and being in solitary confinement is one of the worst. It's complete detachment, right?
Right.
It desensitizes you to so many things. It makes you crave seclusion. It makes you not want to, have trust issues. It makes you have interaction issues. It makes you calculate. It makes you really sit and think about things and calculate them in a manner that the average person don't. So when I sit here and think about what you're saying about, because you don't share Derek being in, and I can look at Derek and I could tell that.
Right.
Because understand he's a good dude, and he's vibrant and all these things, but you could see how it affected him. Mm-hmm. You could really see how it affected him. And I tell people all the time, you've done more than 60 days in solitary confinement, there is a level of trauma and mental health that you're dealing with that you don't even realize because you start to normalize things that are not even normal anymore.
Yeah.
So we definitely need mental health. I think that should be a requirement. I think because we don't even, like, I find myself talking to certain people and it becomes therapeutic. It's only 2 or 3 people that I could talk to that I feel identify what it is that I've been through. I've been through similar things, and I call these 2 or 3 people, and every time we talk, I find out something more about myself. You know what I'm saying? Just listening to them and them giving me their perspective, even if we don't agree and we debating back and forth, but it's always therapeutic for me. It's always like, wow. And I find therapeutic just my own solitude. And I don't know if that's normal, right? I'm most creative when I'm by myself. I'm most creative when I'm just walking alone. I find myself in a different space. I crave that, and I don't. And sometimes I don't know if it's good or bad, But
it's challenging when you have a family and everybody wants engagement, or you're a part of a project and people want you to be engaged. But I have to get by myself in order to hear and to be in tune with my leadership, and to read and stay focused. And so I don't know if it's a bad thing, but I do know that there's some fundamental issues about this country that really need to be shifted in order for us to be a healthy society. All year, we are really working to bring in more Black male-owned businesses. We need to hear from Black men who have products, services, and particularly Black men, but anybody, but we're looking specifically for Black men. And so if you have a business, a real business, we tell you all the time, it's got to have like a tax ID, a bank account, real business. Please hit us up in the DMs at Street Politicians Pod, at Street Politicians Pod, and our team, they're in there. They're looking for the dopest businesses out there, and we want to be able to elevate your platform and to really bring some awareness to your products and services.
So as usual, on Street Politician, we have a lot of friends. We usually bring our friends
Our friends
to the table,
are
and
back.
these three brothers are brothers that I consider friends who are very inspirational, motivational from different walks of life, and they've inspired me in different ways. First, I would like to introduce my brother Shaka Senghor, a writer, entrepreneur, speaker, inspiring speaker, leading voice in criminal justice reform, and president of Shaka Senghor Incorporated. Shaka was locked up for a homicide, ended up doing 19 years in prison. He was released in 2010 after spending 7 years of his prison sentence inside of solitary confinement.
Wow.
He wrote a memoir, which is a dope memoir. He's recipient of numerous awards. I can't even name all the awards he got. We'll be sitting here doing the whole episode on that. But welcome Shaka Senghor to the panel today. What's going on, Shaka?
I'm blessed, man. Thank you all so much for having me. It's good to see y'all faces. I know it's been a while since we all been in person, and just inspired to be here and honored to be here. So thank y'all for having me.
Definitely, man. Thanks for being here. Next, we have another one, a brother that I respect. He took a different route. He grew up where I'm from, my hometown, the Bronx. He's attorney Royce Russell. He went to Hofstra University, where he got his law degree, became a criminal defense and civil rights lawyer in New York City. He's my lawyer.
My lawyer,
You know
too.
what I'm saying? He calls, he does. He's got us out of a lot of stuff and got us into some more stuff. You know what I'm saying? He specializes in criminal defense, false arrests, police brutality, civil rights violations, immigration, contract employment, all types of things. He's one of the dopest lawyers that I know. He also now has a book called Cardiac Arrest. It's a tactical guide on how to handle unlawful police stops. So welcome my brother and friend Royce Russell to the table. Attorney Royce Russell. How you doing, King?
All right. As Shaka said, I'm very happy to see a face with the voice. I always hear the voice because we're communicating all the time, but it's nice to see the face. And I just try to do the right thing by right people when you're out here in the streets. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, man.
I don't think you said Shaka's book. What you said, he has a memoir, but it's actually called Righting My Wrongs.
Righting My Wrongs: Life, Death, and Redemption in an American Prison. It was released in 2016, and it was a New York Times bestseller. I mean, I told you we'll be sitting here talking about all the stuff that Shaka got forever.
Yeah,
so
Shaka's the
Shaka do a lot of
man.
stuff, man. Like, listen, Shaka always calls me with a new idea. Got movies, plays. Like he's definitely a Renaissance man. He's what you should think about when you talk about rehabilitation and redemption and coming home from prison. He's a motto for what it should look like, when you come home and you evolve to the next level. Yeah. And this brother is also one of those brothers. This is Mr. Kevin Chiles, CEO, co-founder of Don Diva magazine. Kevin Chiles is a previous street pharmacist, turned business person and creator. He is most popular for running a medication racket in the roads of Harlem during 1980s. He was charged with tax evasion, opioids trafficking, racketeering. Following a supplication bargain, he also served 10 years in government prison. He opened apparel and boutiques using proceeds from the narcotics transactions. Boss Sneakers and Boss Emporium were two of his investments in the 1980s. He also founded Big Boss Records, his own record label. He does so much, and now he is the writer of a book called The Crack Era: The Rise, Fall, and the Redemption of Kevin Chiles. Welcome, Kevin Chiles, to the show today.
Yeah.
What's going, Kev?
Hey, man. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just honored to be a part of the panel. I appreciate the invite.
Yes, sir.
Black men do write books.
Yes, man. Black men write books. When we thought about this show, I was just thinking about how different ways that we've evolved, being formerly incarcerated after spending 7 years in prison, we get such a bad rap, about coming home or being in prison. People don't believe that you can evolve from that. They have this stigma that you're a criminal and it's just crime, and what I realized, like I told people all the time, when you're a drug dealer, you just sell drugs. When you're a hustler, you can sell anything, and a lot of us, were naturally hustlers when we went to jail. We just had the wrong product that we were selling. You know, so when I see brothers like Kevin Chiles and I see brothers like Shaka Senghor and just the brilliant minds that they are, like when you sit and talk to these brothers, they're brilliant, literally brilliant. You know, and they don't, and a lot of people don't understand the level of brilliance that they've had and just seeing the evolution. So I wanted to utilize my platform to be able to elevate these brothers and then also bring someone like Royce Russell in the conversation who came from the same beginnings that we come from, the same areas, but he utilized his mentality to do he took a different route, you know, but I'm telling you, these brothers are all similar. I speak to them and have conversations and they all have the similar mind frame and they all about the same thing. So I just wanted to talk about their books, talk about their evolution, talk about their processes, you know, and just give them some praise, man, and utilize our platform to highlight them.
I'm all about the praise for Black men. So let's jump right into it. So why don't we talk about the books? You know, what encouraged you, Shaka and Kevin, and Royce, to write your books? You know, the first of all, the titles of each book is very powerful, and so maybe we should start there. You know, what encouraged you to write a book and then title it what you did? So let's start with Shaka.
Thank you so much. It's so good to see you, Tamika. My first book, which is my first mainstream release, not the first book that I wrote, Righting My Wrongs, was inspired by a couple of things. One, I was really fortunate when I was in prison to have incredible mentors who guided me to books. And I used to tell this story that the most important book I read was Malcolm X's autobiography. And I realized that wasn't true. The most important book I read was Donald Goines' Dope Fiend, because he was writing about the inner city and writing about the reality that I had actually came from. And that book led me to read Malcolm X's autobiography. So I have a deep, passionate love for writers in general. You know, the legacy of brilliant writers, the James Baldwins and Alex Haley's of the world, and Maya Angelou, who, you know, is the queen, you know, to me when it comes to a personal narrative. So that energy of writing as a way of healing was something that was deeply embedded. And then there was a Kanye song I was listening to, this verse when he was like, "It's funny how these songs help me right my wrongs," and some iteration of that. And I was like, man, it's a brilliant title for a book, because I started off journaling first before I even wrote a book, because I had to heal from the traumatic experience of being incarcerated at a young age, you know, the traumatic experience of actually taking someone's life, something that we don't talk about. You know, we often talk about the trauma of being, you know, the victim of gun violence, but we don't talk about the long enduring trauma when you take somebody's life and how that continues to stay and endure no matter what. You know, if I rob somebody, I could get them back what I took, but you can never, you know, restore a life in that way. And so, you know, I thought it was really important to share that. And, you know, as you may know, I have a new book coming out, Letters to the Sons of Society. And that title came from being inspired by the letters my dad wrote me while I was in prison. We wrote, you know, for 19 years. We often don't hear the story of Black fathers or fathers in general who stand by their children's side through adversity. And my dad, you know, wrote me for 19 years. We exchanged letters, we argued, we debated, we joked. And I wanted to, you know, really memorialize the world that we live in for my two sons, one who's 30 years old and one who's 10 years old.
So I know you have a new book that you're releasing.
Yeah, you said, yeah. You just said is a new book. What is it called again?
Called Letters to the Sons of Society,
Right.
A father's dedication to honesty, freedom, and love.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. So where are you? So you're in the writing process now, or you finished?
No, it's done. It actually comes out Tuesday.
Oh, okay. That's what's up.
How many books would you say that you've written that you haven't released?
So originally I started off self-publishing. I self-published then went to mainstream publishing, but I got a total of about 8 catalogs. My goal is to hit 10, and I'll be re-releasing some of my earlier work at a future date.
Wow. That's amazing.
Awesome.
That's dope.
Great.
So Kev, what was your inspiration behind your book, the title? You know, just give us a little peep into your brain about what you was thinking about.
Well, let me back up a little bit. You know, Don Diva I created when I was incarcerated. And the reason for me doing that was that I realized how our communities weren't aware of certain information that, that caused me to make some bad decisions in my life. So the creation of that started while I was incarcerated. So for almost 20 years now, we've been publishing Don Diva, and our motto is like, we educate and entertain, and it encompasses a way creatively that we provide information that wouldn't ordinarily be readily available, of some of the pitfalls that happen in our communities, from everything from repairing your credit to some of the laws that we often find out about after we're incarcerated. Having said that, fast forward, to be quite honest with you, you had a lot to do with me writing this book, to be honest with you, my son. That situation that you quite aware of when you went up to Hot 97, which caused me to thereafter go up there to expound on what you have been talking about. I realized after that interview that it seemed like people was interested in what I had to say, and me more personally. So I think probably days after that, I was encouraged to start writing. So from the time that I was up there, which was like in 2016, I think maybe the next 2 years, I spent, just writing more specifically about a time period and myself. But that derived from my invitation to come up to Hot 97 after you had came.
Wait, you guys have to tell us the story. Like, we all want to know what happened.
Well, so basically what he's talking about, and I never knew this. You know what I'm saying? So I'm honored to even be able to inspire something like that. When I did my freestyle on Hot 97, I talked about a lot of the intricacies of the streets. And
are we talking about the freestyle that everybody, the whole world was okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just broke down certain principles, about snitching and certain people that were glorified in the culture. And Kev, being from that era and that culture, was one of the people that when I talked about certain situations that happened, Flex had said something about it. And then it went into, well, we need to get Kevin Chiles up here so he can have and listen to what he talks about. So Kev is somebody that's been respected in the streets and just in the culture in general, and we set up the interview to where he went up to Hot 97 and they asked him about principles in the streets and what makes this snitching and what are these certain rules and codes, and he just broke it down so eloquently, a way that even I couldn't do it, because he just has a different understanding, a way that you just hear him speak in a way like a street pharmacist. Most people don't say street pharmacist, but this is just how Kev, he presents things. So he went up there, he broke it down, and I guess, like he said, just having that conversation and seeing how people were interested in just understanding how he thought and how he perceived things, then he just put it into a book. So that's amazing. I'm honored to have had anything to do with that, man. I appreciate that.
Well, I'm happy that it occurred that way, because I would have never did it. Like I said, we have been publishing this magazine for over 20 years, and we have been interviewing certain individuals that, I found that the community had found very interesting to help to deliver our message. And at no point in time did I ever put much of the emphasis on myself for the most part. So like I said, coming from that interview and seeing how well it was received and it going viral, I was encouraged thereafter, like, well, Kev, you probably need to do something like that. And I put pen to paper, and that's really how that came about.
Wow.
That's dope, man.
Wow, that's very, very encouraging to hear that story and how everything connected, And it's crazy that your freestyle was in 2016.
Yeah.
It seems time's just flying by, but that's a whole different day, a whole different conversation about the universe. So Royce, tell us about your book. I mean, I know a lot about cardiac arrest, and just so happy you took the time to sit down and really in your own way write the letters to our sons, right? So talk about your experience with writing the book.
Well, one of the things that you guys mentioned earlier, Mysonne, you was talking about, being a hustler and being an entrepreneur. I think all those things are something that we have in common, but are also the cultural tie, right? You could be an entrepreneur and have no cultural tie. And although you might be financially successful, you're really meaningless in your soul. So when I looked at cardiac arrest, I did look at, one, the cultural tie between me and the community. And number two, as a business person, what does my community need? Is the void, right? What do we need to learn, right? And so in doing that, I'm saying, well, we're marching, we're talking. What is going to be the long-lasting document or documents that folks can have over a period of time to read to go to. We had the Green Book, we have the Bible, we have a bunch of books out there and guides out there to help us through life. So looking at it from a cultural and an academic and an awareness perspective, when you have laryngitis, Tamika has laryngitis, and you're not out there in the forefront speaking, well, where are we getting the information from? Right? When your time is divided and you're doing other things, where are we getting this information from? How can we make this information with us, take it with us all day, every day? And that's how I came to cardiac arrest. I mean, you mentioned the title. The title is really just an example of our life as people of brown and black color skin out here in America. When police stop you, whether you're driving or whether you're walking, you do have the same symptoms that you're having when you think you're having a heart attack. Your hands get sweaty, your blood pressure goes up. You start thinking about, well, at least for me, what I did in the past, what my future is going to look like, what's going on with the present. So it is, if not a death experience, it's definitely a near-death experience, right? And your heart stopped. And so that's where I got cardiac from. The arrest came from because rarely is the situation resolved when you're not arrested. Something's going to happen. Them cuffs are coming somewhere. And we could define what arrest means, whether that means process down at the precinct, or whether that means standing in handcuffs in front of your car or in front of your loved ones on the street or in the alley. It still is what it is. So how do we perpetuate that? And so I went and wrote the book based upon my experiences growing up in the Bronx, growing up in an area that is not serviced, growing up in the projects, as they say, and kind of extrapolate on that and my experiences being a civil rights attorney. We translated that book into Spanish, and now we have a workbook where brothers and sisters can sit down and they can look at questions, look at answers, multiple choice, A, B, and C. Pick an answer. We can have a discussion why that answer is right or wrong. Or are there two answers that are the same? You just happen to pick one, and I just happen to pick another. And then have a process where they can do critical thinking. They can write down their thoughts of what they see, how they vision their community. How can they become a leader? Using analytical skills, understanding how the Constitution works with you actually being arrested. So although we're having change for those here who may or may not know in New York City from an education standpoint, we will see how far change comes, because this should be part of our educational system, because it combines the reality of what's happening to most people that live in America, and it gives you an education of civics and critical thinking. So that's how I got to where I am.
That's dope. And when I'm listening to you, it correlates and connects to what Kev was saying, what he was doing with Don Diva, like giving knowledge about laws and things in the system that he wasn't privy to until he actually went to prison. So he utilized the magazine to give information and entertain at the same time, and just you doing the same thing, utilizing this book to inform people about how the system works and certain things to do with the system. So I told you that y'all have so much connection and have so many similarities. That's dope. But Shaka and Kev, in the titles of y'all books, there's the word redemption. And I just want to know, y'all expand, what does redemption look like to you? How do you feel like you are redeemed, or do you feel like it's going to take long, you're never going to be redeemed? And if you do feel like you're not redeemed, that you can be redeemed, what will it look like? What would you have to do to be redeemed?
You want to start, Kev, or you want to go?
Feel free.
Yeah, I think my redemption took place far before I ever got out of prison, because it really had to come from within my community, and they had to come from my people. I never thought that the system itself would give me a second chance. And even at this point in my career, there's tons of obstacles that stand in the way of just living a normal life, right? And that's kind of par for the course when you think about being Black in America. But just for an example, people don't know that if you have a felony, it's hard to get life insurance. It's hard to get home insurance. And as a homeowner and as someone who wants to ensure that I protect my son, you know, in the event of my demise, those things are obstacles. They're, you know, things that we have to navigate. So I never have thought that the system itself would be open to allowing us to, you know, redeem ourselves. But for me, it was really about community. And a lot of my work started while I was in prison. You know, I had, you know, these older brothers who challenged me. You know, they challenged me to grow. When I was the hothead on the yard and eventually became like one of the main shot callers on the yard. And I was operating out of those broken emotions of anger and violence and getting in more trouble. Is why I ended up, you know, serving 7 years of solitary confinement. But those brothers always saw something redeemable in me. And they poured into me, they fed me books, and they challenged my ideas. You know, I tell people I used to go to the library, you know, every week, and I would battle with these older brothers. You know, we would have these intense debates around books that they had selected and books that I had selected. And because I read relatively fast, they would often think that I didn't read the books. And so they would grill me like, yo, okay, what was Malcolm talking about on this page? Well, what did Marcus Garvey mean about that? You know what I'm saying? And then they would swing into philosophy. You know, what is Tao, you know, Zhu talking about over here? And so that just sharpened me, but it also grew me. And even though I was rebellious, you know, I caught 36 misconducts when I was in prison. When I needed that wisdom, when I was ready to transform my life, all of that they had poured into me came rushing back to me. And so that's where redemption started. I was an organizer in prison. I actually talk about it in my new book in one of the chapters about resistance. And I remember us organizing 300 men on the yard because we was tired of these two officers who was just running roughshod over people. And I was smart enough to know that if we just violently attacked them, we definitely getting shot down. So what I did is I figured out a way to bend the rules. And basically we organized in groups of 6, and we all did exercise, but they were all different exercises, but we all did one cadence. And that wasn't technically illegal, but the voice of 300 men speaking in cadence at one time in a prison yard completely shook the prison up, and they knew that they had to address that. So to me, redemption started well before I walked out of prison. You know, I started writing before I walked out of prison, and then I came home as a servant to my community, in which I still serve. I mentor all across the country. You know, I've helped build organizations. I'm a supporter and a resource for many organizations. And so to me, it's really just about what my people think. You know what I'm saying? Because the system, you know, they don't really care, you know, to the degree in which, you know, we would identify as redemptive.
Well, that's deep. Kev, so what does redemption look like to you?
For me, redemption is a personal perspective for me. I don't ever think that I was a bad person. You know, I feel as though I made certain choices that egregiously affected people in my community. But for me, I've always considered myself to be a decent person, and I think that had a lot to do with how my outcome, because I've always treated people more than fair. You know, when I started thinking about it in the term more specific redemption, you know, it was like I said, it was a personal endeavor for me and my family. You know, I wanted my family to forgive me for my absence in their lives, not being able to raise my kids for a certain amount of time. You know, I sat with that for a long time in prison because my intention was always to take care of my family. Then the exact opposite ended up ultimately happening when I wasn't there to protect them or to take care of them. You know, so I wanted first and foremost my family to forgive me, you know, because my decisions and choice causes me not to be there, to be a father to my children and to raise them and to provide the things that I always wanted them to have. I always wanted them to have a better life than I had. I knew some of the choices that I made in life was just due to circumstances and my reality of what they was. And it was all with good intentions, you know. So I was on a personal crusade to do that. So from the day that I walked out of prison, there's no way to make up for time, but I spent every moment trying to get my life back together and provide the right example for my sons and of course my daughter. So I spent every moment just trying to do the right thing and you know, and actually beg them for forgiveness. Ultimately, you know, because like was stated just presently, redemption has a different look for certain people. Like society may never consider me redeemable. You know, I made a way when I came home to move my family to an affluent neighborhood, to create the opportunity for my kids to go to affluent schools, to get a better education. You know, these opportunities wasn't provided to me for society because I don't think society will ever forgive me or give me the opportunity that I feel I deserve. So I had to sort of take what I wanted. But more importantly, like I said, I think my crusade was to get my family to understand that the choices that I made wasn't because I didn't want to be absent in the household. And children, especially young impressionable children, they don't sort of understand it. All they understand is that you wasn't present, you wasn't there. You know, so I think I spent every waking moment trying to get to be forgiven by my immediate family, my children more specifically. You know, and ultimately, I think it's showing up that way. You know, so redemption that's sort of like what it means to me. You know, primarily more focused.
It's so interesting that in both stories, in both statements, both of you hold redemption so close to the heart, because there are so many people who live every day for the world. They live for society. They live for what the people gonna say, what the theys, and we talk all the time about who is they. And to hear you make it really personal, that redemption is about the people around you, your own community, you know, those folks who have poured so much into you and your development, and then for there to be something that happens that harms those individuals, that you see redemption as working on that first. And I think that's something that so many of our young men can learn from. And in fact, my son is 22. And I often have conversations with him. Look, and Royce is his lawyer too. We won't get into why Royce is his lawyer, but he is definitely also my son's, protector in terms of trying to keep his mind straight. And there's been so many times that I have told him about carrying our last name as a family. That the way in which he operates in the world, that when he shows up, people need to know that a Mallory child, although he shares his father's last name, which is Ryan's, but nonetheless, people know that he's my child, and he is the grandson of Stanley and Von Sill, who are stellar leaders in the community, and that rather than trying to please the world, you have to first work on securing and helping to, really put respect on the name that you come from. So I think for us, that's a message that young Black men have to hear constantly from us, so that they focus more on the inner rather than Instagram and what the world is telling them.
Yeah,
true.
It's definitely true, man. Just listening to all of you and the perspectives that you have is just enlightening. I just want to know, Shaka, I know that you do a lot of work, and we do similar work with mentoring. How do you approach? Because a lot of people approach mentoring different. When you have conversations with young men that probably are in similar situations or similar mind states that you had when you were young, and you see them going down this path, like, what's the mind state that you approach them? How do you deal with that? Because as we talking about Tamika's son, like, we need a little strategy to try to help our son. So just like, what is your strategy?
Yeah, I think I approach everything from trauma-informed care. I was an honor roll scholarship student with all the potential in the world. And a series of traumatic events happened in my life, from being abused in the household to being shot at a young age. And so when I'm working with young people, for one, I learn to listen more than I talk. I think our instinct is to try to correct, to try to guide. And I've just learned to listen, because typically when you listen, you can start to unravel the mystery behind young people, right? And then it's also detached ego. I don't have my ego attached to any outcomes, because at the end of the day, I had to serve a sentence. And so I'm very clear that if a young person is intent on making poor decisions, like, you can't attach your ego to that, otherwise you'll drive yourself crazy. And so it's egoless mentoring, it's intentional listening, but it's really through the lens of trauma-informed care, really understanding what has happened to our children, what they've been exposed to, where their points of pain are at. And especially with family, I'm parenting, my 10-year-old, his mom and I, we haven't been together for 7 years. So understanding that was a fracture early on, that I had to be intentional about how do I co-parent in a way that's healing, healthy, and that's rooted in the love for him. And thinking about the young men that I mentor, and the young women, I mentor a lot of young ladies as well, is understanding what is that trauma story? What is that origin story? And what is their aspirational story? And so a lot of times just listening and really hearing where they're coming from, but also being willing to be vulnerable and be honest, and to not glorify past decisions. Like, I was convicted of second-degree murder when I was 19 years old. And, you know, I understand the culture, you know, the whole, you know, how we celebrate the psychotic behaviors that exist in our community, you know what I'm saying, and how we elevate that, right? You know, I was put on a pedestal in the hood as a shooter. And so for me, really getting them to understand there was the prison sentence, but then there's the reality of, you know, this is something I live with every day. You know what I'm saying? My brother was murdered last summer, and I couldn't properly grieve because I know I made a family feel the way that our family was feeling.
Wow.
And so trying to unravel, you know, that reality for them in a way that's honest, that's transparent, that's not about glorifying, you know, like, yes, I got shot. And the story we hear when somebody gets shot is like, oh, you know, I did this and I had to get back. What we don't hear is that when I was sitting in that hospital bed, that I was afraid because I was really a kid. You know, 17 years old, you're a kid. But when the stories are retold, oftentimes they're glorified as if we are void of emotions, as if we are void of fear, or as if we don't experience sadness. And so that listening, you start to tune in, and then language is so important. You know, when I talk to the young brothers, I intentionally call them brothers. I don't call them, yo, what up, my little nigga? Because that word, as much as we use it in our culture, and it's not to be, you know, it is what it is, but it also creates a barrier between emotional honesty. And I think when I've talked to these young brothers, they can't wait to be hugged by a man, like a man that stands in the authenticity of his manhood with love and emotional growth and maturity. Like, these young brothers crave that, and they're afraid to seek it out. So we have to be seeking out how to give it to them, but we have to listen first.
Let me ask you, Royce, just thinking of, you know, me saying that you have worked with Tariq, and I have called you many times late night, like, can you talk to him? You know, can you help to translate things that I have not been able to articulate well? And, you know, and also just to help him see what the end result of, you know, not coming home on time, nobody knows where you are, these types of things, like what can happen. I'm assuming that you have so many clients that you are, you know, that you're defending and working with professionally, that you have to stop and take time to also mentor and try to work them through some of the mental and emotional challenges that they're facing. So tell us what that looks like for you in your work, and how exhausting is it as a Black man? Do you feel like it's your responsibility to do that with you know, people that you are working with, your clients?
Well, first of all, you do a great job with giving your son advice. It's just that where he's hearing it from, right? It's not the advice in and of itself that is not good advice. It's who I'm hearing it from, and whether or not I want to give credence to that because I'm a male and she's a female, despite what you do in the world, right? And then it takes a little bit of, yeah, I heard that before. I remember when my mom said that. You mean like this has been going on for generations? Yeah, this has been going on for generations, and this is how you're going to have to deal with it. And I think once those who are younger see someone that is older saying, yeah, I had that experience, and this is how I went through that experience, then it shows a different light. But I can never be as eloquent to reflect what Shaka just said in reference to how you go about being this mentor, because what you're speaking to is, as an attorney, that's exactly what I am. Because most of the people that I represent, young, old, in between, people of color, I'm probably maybe the first or second time they've had an attorney that's African American. They've had legal aid, they've had neighborhood defenders, they had the attorney that their family thought was going to do the right thing. And usually that's not a person of color. So then here I come walking through the door, right? Intentionally, unintentionally, referral, you name it. And now they're seeing, maybe for the first time, someone of color that is talking about the things that they did. Then you add on top of that, once I get to let them know me, because that's what comes first, right? They're not going to, you know, tear down their guard. That defense is there. It's always been there. It got to be there every day, 24 hours, 7 days a week. It's going to be there when I get finished talking to them and they go upstairs. It's there when they come down in the elevator to have their legal consultation. It's going to be there. So somebody has to tear down the wall. And so as we having the conversation, then they realize, oh, you grew up in the Bronx. Or they realize you were shot at. Oh, you did go to prep school. Oh, but you all sat together, all of the 5 blacks that you had in your class out of 35 or 60 whites. You sat together, you ate lunch together. It's a different type of incarceration, but all the attributes that look quite similar, the congregation, the isolation, and at the age 14, when you don't really understand racism and you really understand classism and how that works together, and somebody comes up to you and say the wrong thing, and next thing you know, they're on the floor and they're almost dead because they hit their head on the marble table because you did something, and the isolation that comes after that, when you start to relay those stories and you start to talk about people that they may have heard of, that you hung out with, or that you were in the presence of, but just for whatever reason, you left a little bit earlier, right? You know, those things start to resonate. So what I do in my practice and what I do every day, whether it's mentoring or whether it's advising, is that we're going to walk the walk together. That's just what we got to do. We're going to walk the walk together. And I'm going to call you on things that are just flat out, what are you talking about? Like, what are you saying? Like, what are you really saying? Is this what you're saying? Because nah, that's not what's really right. And then there's going to be some things, and there's going to be a lot of things that as we talk about trauma, like I never really saw it that way because I don't see myself being traumatized, right? But I was, right? To a certain degree, and I don't blame anybody for it. You got 7 people in a 3-bedroom apartment, 1 bathroom, and where you can study is in the bathroom. You can't study anywhere else. TV's too loud, music's too on. You can't study. You were confined in that bathroom that's probably 5 by 5. And if someone goes to the bathroom and does something, you can't go back into the bathroom to study. You're sitting on the edge of a tub, reading on a hamper. It sounds pretty isolation to me. It sounds like you isolated to me. Different, once again, never the same, but kind of the
no, I mean
attributes
it's
of it,
but
right?
and then you're sitting inside of an apartment that is located inside of a housing projects where everything is going on, and there's trauma that exists just from being in proximity to our communities and you know what's happening. No matter what you're doing, I was a kid who grew up in a household that was very different from my neighbors. Right, we didn't have. It wasn't well, you know, and that's relative. I was gonna say we didn't have drug addicts like in our home, like my parents weren't drug addicts. But the truth is, Uncle Jimmy, who came every Sunday, was a crack addict, and he had AIDS. He had to sit in one space in the house where he was also homeless. He was bleeding. My mother, you know, but she was still gonna let him in, so he was being taken care of. My brother was in and out of the system. Shot this one, this happened, that happened, he's in jail, back and forth. And while they were, my father was a correction officer, my mother was working for Taxi and Limousine Commission. They were good people. We were the best of the best in the building, but we still lived in Manhattanville projects. So the trauma is still there.
Yeah, and then so then when you leave that restroom, that bathroom, everybody is talking about how they want you to be a success, but nobody is giving you the means to be successful. You're all in my way. Like what? So you translate that to people that you come across, at least in my practice, right? And we kind of focus on the young folks, but really, I'm talking to men at 55, 56, 35, 34, and no matter what the decade is, they're like, yeah, that happened. And 65, and like, you still doing this at 65? And I'm amazed sometimes at myself, and Shaka probably can speak to this, and definitely Kevin can speak to this, how I'm speaking to some people in some type of way that I know if they want to do something, in a minute, it could be over. You know what I mean? Like if they really want to do something, they really want, like, you know what, you talking to me some type of way. I know where your office is. This can be a situation. The reason why you can do that is because your authenticity, your sincerity, your culturalism. They even though they don't know what to call it, they see it as a mentorship. You know, even though they don't know what to say it, they see it as love. Even though they don't know what to say it, you their peoples. And you never have to worry about anybody filing any appeal. You ain't got to worry about nobody saying you sold me down the river. It's because of that relationship.
That's dope. You know, I was just sitting here just thinking about all the traumas that we deal with, right? And just listening to and knowing a little bit of everybody's story here. You know, I was thinking about this. It's kind of a deep question, and I don't know if you ever thought about it, but Shaka, have you ever, like, the family members of the person whose life you taken, have you ever had any conversation with them or had some, like, express some level of sorry, or was that ever something that you wanted to do? Was it an opportunity? Did that ever happen?
Like a reconciliation?
Yeah, some type of reconciliation.
Yeah, that's a great question, my son. I think it's, it really speaks to what I was talking about earlier, how you carry this for the rest of your life. So about 5 or 6 years into my prison sentence, I got this letter from a woman named Nancy. And initially, I mean, for those of us who've been in prison, you know how pen pals randomly write is, your mom's friend from the church or aunt's friend or a neighbor. So I didn't know who this woman was. And I remember opening the letter and I started to read it. And what she said to me was, I want to tell you a story about David, the man whose life you're responsible for taking. This is who he is as a father. This is who he is as a son. This is who he is as a friend. And so she tells me this story. She raised him as his godmother. And I remember wanting to ball that letter up. Like, I was so shaken, like I didn't even know what to do. At the time, I was probably about 22 or 23. But I kept reading that letter. And in that letter, she said, despite these things, I forgive you because that's what God would want me to do. And her and I started corresponding. And I remember she would ask me, like, what happened that night? And I would give her the very just practical things, but she was like, what happened to you? Like, what happened to you at 19 years old that made you take a man's life? I could tell from your letters that you're very intelligent, very insightful. And so we went on this journey where I was avoiding for a long time, even telling her all the elements of what happened. It was a drug transaction that went wrong that he shouldn't have been part of. Somebody else brought him. So I avoided all that for a while. And eventually we got to that truth. Fast forward, I get out of prison. I originally self-published, but a lot of people don't know I originally self-published Writing My Wrongs. I hustled that book out of the trunk 2013. That book that I hustled out of the trunk eventually reached Oprah. Once it reached Oprah, I was able to, parlay that into a mainstream deal, right? When I went mainstream, I go on the local news station just to, pub in the book, all the stuff we do. I get an email from the journalist, and she says, David's wife reached out to you. She wants to connect. And so she sent her email and said, if he's serious about his redemption, he will call me. I was in the middle of a program, the rapper Big Sean, he's from Detroit, and he does this mentoring program. I was a speaker. I had to step out, call David's wife, call her. And we get on this call and she was like, I'm so proud of the man you've evolved into. And, I've really been wanting to speak with you for a while. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is when you're incarcerated for an assault of crime, you can't reach out to the family. You can't reach out to anybody that you victimized unless they reach out to you first. And so I had been wanting to have that conversation with, specifically his wife. And so we ended up having this conversation and we talked and, we exchanged some texts. And then sadly and unfortunately, they decided to sue me once they saw all the Oprah thing, right? And I'll tell you this, at the most human level, I understood their anger and I understood their frustration, but I also understood that they were wrong in their efforts to extract money for me sharing my life story. But because of the empathy and the understanding I had for their family, I didn't show up with any anger. You know what I'm saying? I showed up with empathy and compassion, and all the exchanges between our lawyers were compassionate and, empathetic. And so what I realized in that moment is that they were in the midst of a deep, deep hurt and deep sorrow, as many families are who has lost a loved one. And that pain manifested with outsiders telling them this is how they should get justice. Even though I had already served my time and did all the things that I needed to do to deal with the legal part. And so what I would say, my son, is that, these things that we find, these moments that we find ourselves in, that was a 30-second decision that ended a life, and it completely changed my life for the rest of my life. My young son has had to deal with the fallout from, my experience, going to school and, a kid can say, hey, your dad's a murderer. There's business, there's people I've dealt with, there were job opportunities And so everything that I've been able to do, I had to kind of create it very grassroots, very, you know, guerrilla style, you know what I'm saying? Hustle until you break through. And once you break through, there's no going back, but it endures, you know? And so for me, I think it's important for us to atone when we can and where we can. It may not always be directly to the people that you've harmed, but there's other people in proximity. Like I've worked with mothers of murdered children back when I was in Detroit, and I was able to sit as a proxy for, you know, the men who had killed these mothers' kids. And I was able to sit and allow these sisters to say, I don't like you, I hate you, I'm hurt by you, I'm devastated by you. And I was also able to apologize on behalf of those men and facilitate healing. And like, that's the work that is a lot of that's behind the scenes, but restorative practices are popping up all over. And I think it's one of the linchpins to actually healing our community, because as we know, violence is cyclical. You kill my brother, I kill your brother, you know? And I just, you know, spared a whole family when my brother was murdered. I went home, you know, I'm in a D, I'm official in the street. The brothers, they love me. My brother got killed, the whole block was there. And they like, we know where his mom at, we know where his brother's at right now. We about to go around. And I was like, no, we not. That's not what's happening here. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes we have to step up and say, you know what? It got to end here. You know, my family is hurting. You know, this was our baby brother. He wasn't in the streets. He wasn't doing anything wrong. And all of us, most of my brothers, we're all from the streets. So it's easy to justify that kind of reaction. But the responsible and healing thing to do is to disrupt that. And so I was fortunate that, you know, I'm the OG. I'm OG enough for them to actually listen.
Wow.
But that's part of the restorative practices.
What's your brother's name?
Sherrod. His name's Sherrod Red. And I was fortunate before the new book came out, to be able to, you know, dedicate this book to him and other young brothers and sisters and families who have lost a loved one. And, you know, it's hard though, you know, because it's like it ain't even been a full year, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, it's the nature of our community that we got to talk more about. That's, you know, this reckless gun violence, and you know, his circumstances was different. Like I was in the street stuff. You know, there's you know, understanding in that world of these are the potential outcomes. So when it happens differently, it hurts differently. But you know, I just look at these moments, man, as opportunities to further heal our community and really advise, you know, young people like how to think about these things differently.
That's right, man. And so we got to wrap this up, but I really want to ask Kev a question, just based on just what you said, right? And knowing some of Kev's story. Kev, you know, I read, or I think I seen an interview where you were talking about how your mother was killed, and and I just was listening to it and just trying to process it. And I believe it was just based off someone trying to do something to you or trying to extort you or something, or some get back. Did you, when that happened, did you blame yourself? Do you still blame yourself for the situation? How did you come to terms with that whole situation?
Well, for clarity, it actually didn't have anything to do with me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It was actually brought to my doorstep by a very good friend of mine at the time, his girlfriend, who at the time was maybe 18 years old, and she had got kidnapped. And it just so happens that the kidnapping happened in the Bronx, probably minutes from where my mother lives. You know, my mother lived in the Fordham Hill section, University, you know, in that vicinity. And this happened like in a section, like in like the Fordham Hill section of the Bronx, where this young lady was visiting a girlfriend of hers. And then when she left the apartment, they abducted her, and they had asked her for money. And me and her boyfriend, you know, we were like intertwined in our illegal dealings. So I guess when they had her, they had asked her to take them to my house to get some money, or some kind of way my name came up in the conversation. In any event, she brought them to my mother's house, and they manipulated themselves to get into the apartment, maybe saying something that happened with me. My mother knew who this young lady was, but she wasn't, you know, directly associated with her, but she happened to know who this young lady was. So some kind of way they gained access to the apartment in search of money and drugs and those kind of things, which none of that was there. But to answer your question, indirectly or directly, it still was because of the life choices that I had made, of course. You know, had I not chose that as an occupation, then it would have never ended up at my mother's doorstep. So to answer your question, frankly, you know, it's not a day that's went by, and that's been over 30 years that I've been able to forgive myself. And that's one of the reasons why I go so hard for my family, you know, to make it make sense, because, you know, especially around holidays and certain things, even with the birth of my grandkids, because I'm a grandfather now, to know that she wasn't here to see that, you know what I mean? And I did all of these things for that reason. I mean, I actually got into the drug game because of the poverty that we was in, and I was trying to pick up some of the slack around the household, you know, to take the burden off of her and make the load a lot lighter, you know. So ironically, that been the end result. Almost like felt like my efforts was in vain, because that was really what motivated me in the first place. So I feel 100% responsible for it. You know what I'm saying? And that's not something you wake up and you can ever shake. You know, you can never rid yourself of that guilt. You know. And I walk around with it all the time, you know what I'm saying? But again, I have to do so much to the right to offset what went to the left. You know, in every waking moment, trying to just, you know, make it all make sense when it's said and done, you know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, I feel directly responsible for it. And it's not nothing I've ever been able to like sidestep.
What's the therapeutic process? First of all, thank you to the three of you for being so vulnerable
and transparent.
This is probably one of the most moving shows that we've done. The first one for me was watching the experience between Mysonne and Hill Harper, where they both became teary-eyed on a show talking about some of the same issues, the trauma that Black men specifically face. And that show for me was probably the first, you know, the one that moved me the most, but this would certainly be the second. Just listening to you all talk about your lives and talk about your story. My son's father was murdered. Now it's been 20 years ago. He was shot twice and left in a ditch for 2 weeks before his body was discovered. Completely decomposed, obviously, by the time he was found. And, you know, we were never able to give him a proper burial. And I had for a long time believed that just because my son had me, you know, my mom, my dad, my sister, and so many people around, that he didn't have all of this trauma. When he, you know, I was always thinking, well, you've been well taken care of. You didn't want for anything. But it took my son and other men around me to say that experience, even though he was only 2, he's still dealing with the trauma of his father being murdered and the way that he was murdered. And, you know, I realized that Black men have a real story. And so, again, thank you so much for telling it. And then, and the last thing I think as we close out is, what is the therapeutic process? Because, Kevin, I'm not sure whether you're in therapy, but I know that what you just said requires it, right? Shaka, I'm pretty sure you have had some therapeutic experience. And even Royce, while yes, you are helping other people, but there's definitely a need to work through what you see Black men who look like you going through every day, because sometimes I think there can be a little bit of survivor's remorse for those of us who have made it, so to speak. So are you all, is anybody, you know, here receiving therapy, or is it something you're looking to do? Can we, you know, whoever wants to take that question could just jump in.
Well, I'll answer that. I'll answer that first. I love therapy. I mean, like, I can't even imagine life without it. And for a couple of reasons that you mentioned. One, I know I'm jaded. I know I'm jaded. I was fortunate enough to go to a prep school where, you know, I'm less than 1%. I knew why I was there. I was there to play basketball. Didn't understand racism. I understood classism because I was still on food stamps and stuff of that nature. Family was able to work through it, struggling with, well, you want me to be a success, but it sure don't seem like it. You know what I mean? And going to school and being stressed out with, like, don't worry about tuition, don't worry about this, just study. So, and I love my family for that. I mean, like, that was nothing wrong with that. That was a situation we were in. But who does that make you, right? Who does that make you when you look in the mirror and you like, yo, look, I can't count on nobody but me. And people are reaching out, but you like, nah, I ain't gonna take that because I know there's gonna be disappointment at it. You don't know it's gonna be that you don't see it as disappointment, but you like, you know what, I'm gonna do my own thing. I got it. It's something not right about that. When your only cheerleader is you, and you can't let anybody be a cheerleader for you. You know what I mean? You can't let or your whole life you're looking for a partner to be a cheerleader for you. Or because people will, people may not see what you see. And so, yeah, I gotta get on that phone, call Dr. Gray up. Let's have this conversation. It goes professional, it goes personal, it goes perspective, right? How much success is success? Can you like bow down now? Is it the right thing to try to become a judge? How limited is that? There's a lot of things that go on with carrying a torch of trying to make sure that culturally and legally we all right. Because it's not, once again, it's not a lot of us doing it. New York City is a big place, but you could probably 10 lawyers you could probably think of that practice in this area, whether it's civil rights or criminal defense, that's of color, that give a damn.
Wow. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can 100% identify with everything that Royce just said. And I'm very thankful for you being an attorney. My attorney who actually saved my life is a Black attorney as well. His name is Mr. Anthony Rico. And,
yes, love him.
He wasn't just an attorney. I learned a lot of life lessons with him, and I had a lot of Italian high profile lawyers, Jewish lawyers that came to me that I thought aesthetically probably fit the bill better than he did. But it was something that he said when we spoke that I knew it was relatable, and I identified with him, So and I chose him for a lawyer, and my life has ever been different because he shared some life lessons with me that to this day I live by. So I identify and relate to everything that you're saying, and like you said, it's just not enough of you guys in this field because it would change the lives of a lot of us. But to get back to the point of therapy and that. My whole family looks toward me to make the right choices and decisions, and to propel my family from poverty and to the middle class and into ultimately generational wealth. And like I said, I've been on a mission since I came home, and I've single-handedly have moved them and put them in a position that, I know that if I wasn't doing what I was doing, I don't know what that would look like. So with my accomplishments, and my success is I think what soothes my soul and keeps me a little bit at peace. But I'm sure that I could probably sit, and unpack some of this trauma that I've dealt with my whole life. Because I know I'm very desensitized to a lot of things that I've just made common. Like, it's a commonality. I've normalized it, to get by. Because even when I wrote the book, it was very therapeutic. There was a lot of things that I reflected on, and I was like, I don't even really believe that I endured that, or I went through that, or I even was a part of that, because it was such a heinous, vicious time. So to even be present today, I consider it a blessing. Being a grandfather was nothing I ever envisioned. Coming back, putting my daughter through college and seeing her graduate, and then now having a child. I didn't even think I would ever be even a part of their lives. I didn't think I was gonna live long enough to see this day. Wow. But the fact that I have done is a testimony to me just enduring and getting by. And then, like I said, I live in the memory of my mother. So everything I do is I'm doing, for her more specifically. And I honestly think that she would be proud of me, but the man that I turned into present day and all the things that I've done. So do I think I could use therapy? I think all Black men could use some therapy.
Yep,
I think we
absolutely.
could, coming from urban environments, that's a fact. But I still feel blessed to be here today. And like I said, I'm honored to have been a part of this panel today. It's very insightful for me. I'm glad that I was a part of it. Thank you for having me.
Here,
yeah. And I'll just add, I know we're wrapping up.
Shaka, before you answer the question, and I know they're going to kill me. The whole production team is looking at me like I'm crazy. But we talked about this earlier in the show. My brother told me this past weekend that he did 60 months in solitary confinement. I don't know why I didn't know. I mean, I thought I did his bid with him, but clearly, maybe because I became a teenager, I missed some time. I had no idea that he sat in solitary confinement for 5 years. But he told me he grew up in solitary. And I'm just trying to, I just want to know, like, when we talk about therapy, like, what has it been like for you to deal with, returning to life after having sat in solitary, what would you say, for 7 years? Because my son always tells me after how many days, something?
I think after 90 to 60 days, it changes you. It does something mentally to you.
Yeah.
It need more time than that.
Yeah, no, it's one of the most horrendous things that we can do to another human being. And I think a lot of people experience just a minor glimpse of what that's like with the pandemic. That feeling of being alone, that feeling of not knowing when things are going to change. The hardest thing for me about being in solitary is my sentence was indefinite, which means it's not like, hey, you're going to be there for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days or a year. You're just going to be there until they decide to let you out. And so you can never really put your feet on solid ground. And it's the most barbaric stripping of a human being. People often ask, why do I write from such a space of vulnerability? It's because I've already been stripped of everything. And so for me, regaining ownership over my life, requires me to confront the things that have made me uncomfortable in life. And, when I think about my therapeutic processes since I've been out, and I promise I can't wait for y'all to read this book, and it's not even just on a sales pitch, but I get into like the molecular level of what it was like coming out, because those that know me, the public facing side, right? The accomplishments, the accolades. But I talk about in a new book, the dark side of it. What happens when the lights go off, when the cameras are not there, when I'm alone in a hotel room, processing all the trauma that I've just vomited up. And, so I started seeking out counseling. I started seeking out therapy. And sadly, it is really hard to find a Black therapist.
Yeah.
It's hard to find a Black male therapist that doesn't have a back caseload of people that can't afford to give you the attention. And the last therapist I had, cool dude, but the same thing continues to happen over. They get so enraptured in the reality that I survived what I survived that I almost become their therapist. Because they can't even believe that I thrive at this level and that I've been able to do the things that I do and still show up as a full human being, where they're like, damn, well, what do I need to do? You know what I'm saying? And so it's made it very difficult, but I can tell you, I'm really fortunate. I read a lot of books. I write, writing is my therapy, and I just have incredibly beautiful people in my life, people who I can talk to about all the things, and having a, being a dad where a lot of my fatherhood has been as a single dad, is really watching my son's processes, watching who he is and how he's become without all the trauma has helped me even understand the depths of the trauma. Because a lot of the trauma we talk about right now is like prison and gun violence, but it's deep. It goes back to our childhood. It goes back to what happens in our household, and whether it's out of survival, whether it's out of a repeated cycle, a lot of that trauma that comes from there bleeds over into how we show up in the rest of the world. So I'm just a big advocate of people really taking care of their mental health, their emotional health, cutting out the things and the people that don't serve where you're trying to get in life. I don't have no problem shutting down shop at this point. I've matured and grown to a space of really understanding that we as Black men specifically, we deserve joy. We deserve to be able to receive love, not just show love. We deserve to be provided for and not just be providers. And that is holistic living and an experience that we've been robbed of and deprived of. And oftentimes we've deprived ourselves of it. And so, for me, therapy is is really important. And lastly, I'll say this. I ran into Iyanla Vanzant, who I did some minor work with before. And we were just talking briefly, like a 5-minute talk. And what she said to me has left an imprint on me that I know what I need to do. Is she said, Shaka, no matter how you show up in the world, no matter how brilliant, how talented, how successful you are, what happens to you is embedded in you physically. And you have to move that energy out of your body. And I was like, damn. She was like, as a human being, you cannot be confined to solitary for 7 years without that impacting your cells, like the cellular nature of your being. you know, and so it was just like it started showing me like all these little things, these nuanced things, you know, the emotional disconnect that comes so easily, you know, emotional distance from anything that's inconvenient, not even just hard, that's inconvenient. I don't have time for that. You know what I'm saying? Who got time for those feelings, right? Not even liking being touched. Like it took years for me to be comfortable with like just a hug. You know, how I have conversations to be able to enjoy and express myself without skepticism, you know? And so, you know, there's long-term implications of incarceration, and it doesn't matter the length of time, I promise you. You know, and this is something that I think we can all appreciate. I'm a big fan of hip hop. You know, I think I'm one of the biggest fans of hip hop. Pay attention to every artist who has ever been arrested for any amount of time. The indignity of being stripped, searched, the indignity of being, you know, having officers look in your most intimate of spaces, the indignity of being shorn of all agency over anything that you would normally do as an adult, like that psychologically damaged you. And none of them have ever been the same after that. You see a heightened aggressiveness, you see a heightened defensiveness, because these are real consequences of what prison does, far beyond, you know, so-called protecting the community. So big advocate for mental health. Happy y'all are talking about it. And, you know, such a pleasure to meet you, brothers. Kevin, you know, Don Diva saved my life many times in prison, you know, reading those articles and just keeping us connected to what was going on in the community. And it's so dope to just see, you know, a brother who was actually not just a legal counsel, but also blessing us with the jewels so that, you know, in the event we need to understand what's happening legally, we had it at our disposal. So salute to y'all. Can't wait to grab y'all brothers' books.
Yes, definitely. I'll make sure that y'all connect and y'all exchange information, and y'all stay connected, because these are the type of brothers that y'all need to be around. I can just see y'all creating and building together something that'll be, you know, phenomenal. So that was my process when I put this whole thing together. So we got to go.
Good job. You did a good job. You
did
something today.
I did a little something, right?
You know, I have to give you a little bit of props. I usually beat you up, but you know.
I did a little something, man.
Y'all
made me look good.
Together.
I appreciate it. So listen, man,
we got to
for
you.
22.
Okay,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
So listen, man, we got to go, because we can just have this whole conversation. We probably could do this for 4 or 5 hours. You know, I'm in awe of all of you guys, man. So make sure you get your book. Royce, what's the name of your book?
Cardiac Arrest, a tactical guide on how to handle unlawful police stops. You also have it in workbook form. And I'm going to do like Shaka do. I'll show you the workbook. So there you go.
That's right.
All right.
Shaka, what's the name of your book? Say it one more time.
The new book is Letter to the Sons of Society, a Father's Invitation to Love, Honesty, and Freedom.
I understand freedom. Make sure you go get that book. And Kev, let them know the name of your book.
Crack Ever, The Rise, Fall, and the Redemption of Kevin Chiles.
Yes, sir, man.
And I have a book. And it is called
State of
Emergency. Okay,
right.
how we win in the country we built.
That's right, man.
Yeah,
Listen, all this black excellence in these black books, man. Make sure you go out and get everybody's
And your book.
And my book is I Know My Rights. It's the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, just broken down for our youth to understand their rights when they're actually engaged by law enforcement and have to deal with the law in any, you know, capacity. Yeah. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, brothers.
I appreciate you, man. I look forward to continue to build with you, brothers. I'm glad that I got all y'all on speed dial, man. So I appreciate y'all. Nothing but love, man. Continue to be great. Make sure you go get all of these books. These books are things that are going to elevate you and give you understanding of what we go through in this culture and how us as black men have to adapt and continue to evolve and go through so many things, but still we rise, man. I appreciate y'all.
All right.
Thank you.
Much love, brothers. I love you all.
Love.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dope.
You did good, because that was excellent.
Powerful show, man. Shout out to those brothers, Royce Russell, Shaka Senghor, and Kevin Chiles. 3 people that I respect. You know, I call them for different jewels, and they delivered today.
I mean, it was powerful. There was so much, you know. Also, being around you and
and let me just give a shout out to my brother Delson, who is the person that actually connected me with Kevin Chiles.
I need to go.
And he's another dude that is another real insightful brother that I talk to, give me a lot of insight and jewels. So shout out to him.
I gotta get in my DMs and debate with Delson because he loves to debate me on things or give me a little bit of information about stuff I may not be paying attention to. But I'm gonna tell you, when I listened to them and what they were saying, I think about just over time, and specifically since I'm with you and Angelo, attorney Angelo Pinto, our other co-founder at Until Freedom, and since I'm with y'all so much, and I listen to the things y'all say. You may not think so because Linda and I argue back and forth with y'all all the time, but I do listen. And even in my book where you wrote your part, your piece where you talk about your experience, you say starting out that you have always felt like there was no one that you could depend on. And then hearing Royce also say that, like, you know, he had to be his own cheerleader. It's just, it resonates so much, the stories, that no matter what the background may be or where you all have come, gone, and how you've evolved, there are still these fundamental challenges about Black men not feeling supported, loved, respected. And that's painful to hear, especially being the mother of a Black son, because I don't want him to feel that way. But there's something about society that just does that to our men.
It is, man, and it's a common thread. When you listen to Roy say that, I shook my head like, wow, you feel like you're your own cheerleader. You don't want to be disappointed, so you just figure it out. Kev was talking about how he just he normalized. Like I say, a lot of times we've normalized abnormality. He normalized disappointment. He's emotionally detached. When you listen to Shaka, he could just walk away. He don't even want to deal with anything that inconveniences him, right? When you go through so many things in life and you deal with certain levels of trauma, imprisonment, you know, violence and all those things, you become numb to certain things. You become so detached. Like, I feel like I need levels of seclusion in my life. I just need to be by myself. I don't, you know, I can't share space. There's so many different things that we deal with as Black men, going through what we've been through, man, and just hearing them just say it, right? And just being able to say, word, you know, I know what that is, man. So it's therapeutic just listening to other people who have shared experiences, who have shared emotions and things that you dealt with that you never even been able to express or tell to anybody else. And it's to hear them freely, like you said, be transparent and vulnerable on this space was just something that was very enlightening.
It is, isn't it crazy? Maybe this is the wrong perspective, but how the things that cause us trauma also can teach us such powerful lessons. Like the things that we see that might not be good for us on one hand actually teach us humility and other things. So I talked about my cousin Jimmy. You know, we call all the older people uncles, so he's Uncle Jimmy to me, but he was actually my cousin. And he used to come to our house every Sunday when we lived in the projects. He was on drugs, homeless, and he had AIDS. He was bleeding at times. He had all kinds of issues. I probably as a young kid shouldn't have been seeing that, right? At the dinner table in our house, they cleaned the area, but they fed him. That trauma also taught me humility. It was important for me to see my family not think that they were so uppity, that they would not still take care of and love up on a family member who was, you know, going through, he was at the end of his life. And it's like Black folks just we always have to juggle with so many different realities and then be able to get the best from the worst. So watching him in his situation wasn't, because I remember it and it traumatizes me at times, his smell, all of these things that he was going through. But he also he loved us so much, and he was able to come back to a home despite whatever his situation is. I know that did something good for me, even though the images are things I'll never get out of my mind.
That's real. When, you know, we learn, so like you said, we learn from our trauma, and it teaches us certain things, man. So dope episode. You know, shout out to those brothers. And that brings me to my I don't get it.
What don't you get this week?
So we talking about all of these real things. Like this is a real deep episode. And reality. You know, this is like real reality. These are things, tangible things you see, you touch, you smell, you actually engage And as we move towards, the future, and we talk about NFTs and crypto, right? And those being the next biggest things. And I get why, I get what's going on because, I got kids that play PS4 and all these things.
It's PS5 now.
PS5 and PS4. They really, listen to me. They play PS5, but these kids love their PS4. They don't even, my kids still ain't even open. I bought a PS5 for them last Christmas that they ain't open. And they still playing the PS4. I don't know what it is, but that's just their thing. But when you look and see how they on this game, and every day, Keston, my youngest son, comes to me and like, Dad, I need $20. I said, for what? For V-Bucks. I'm like, what is V-Bucks? I want to buy the new skin. I want to buy this. And he's paying for virtual outfits. Literally paying for clothes that
it's the metaverse.
He's paying for clothes. So I realized that this is the future because all the kids are doing it. They want V-Bucks. So NFTs actually make sense in that regard. But the reality is people are going to be investing in owning virtual stuff like it's a real life. Like people are going to be buying things on the internet like it's a real place that they're actually visiting, like clothing and shoes and shopping for food. Like they had a whole program where you go in Walmart and you shopping like and you spending real money. Like you're
but
spending
you gotta have some kind of tangible something from that.
But in their mind it is because they've created a whole universe that you live inside this universe and you tune in and it's like a real life. And that's what the future is going to look like. And I just don't get how we've normalized some shit like that. Like, how have we normalized? We
always had that, though, Mike. It just has progressed.
It's not progress. I don't think that's progression.
I'm saying, progress. I don't mean progress in a positive or negative. I'm just saying it's developed into a more expensive, more whatever, right? I don't even know the proper word I'm looking for. But because I bought stuff too. First of all, if you think about a doll baby, we had to buy all the extra little clothes, the top, the skirt.
But you owned the doll baby.
I know, but this is not
it was
the
your
own
doll
the doll
baby that you touched.
Yeah, but it's not the own the doll baby world.
Exactly.
The doll baby's on the computer.
So listen to me. They're going to have Louis Vuitton stores. They're going to have all of this in the metaverse where you actually spend money for those clothes as pretty much the same prices that you spend out here, and you're gonna own them inside the metaverse.
It's what's happening. That's why your cell phone is now almost $2,000. You know, the cell phone is almost $2,000.
I get it, but I own my phone though. See, I can touch this. It stores my things. Yeah, like a metaverse. It's virtual reality. Like we're really gonna be paying to own things in virtual reality with a lot of real money. And people invest, and that's what the future is going to look like.
You can go to a party.
So what it's going to do?
With your friends be in their virtual
inside the party,
world.
and they're being virtual world. And the thing is, what that's going to do is just eliminate people from real. This is what the whole pandemic thing is. That's a problem. Like people are going to live so much in virtual reality that they're not even going to be living in real reality.
That's gonna be their real reality.
That's crazy.
Because let me tell you, right now, people think Instagram and whatever else, these different online things, that's their reality. That's where they live.
But at least Instagram is pictures of your real life, right? You
but
outside.
That's how it's gonna be.
You living in but that's not in the metaverse. It's not your real life.
No, it is because it's gonna be your picture, right?
No, it's gonna be you.
Yeah,
like
I understand.
Like you inside there, you moving around inside this place that really don't exist, and y'all be in there with your little character.
On the thing, your friends will be on the headphones, and you'll see and hear them speaking to you, and y'all will be together.
I'm not.
So instead of writing on Instagram a message back and forth, you will be acting out whatever it is that you're saying to your friend, or having the conversation with them in person. Anyway,
no way.
Our show has been long today.
Long show.
A good show.
But it was a dope show. Yeah. Shout out to the brothers who came up here. Make sure you get all of their books. Cardiac Arrest, The Crack Era by Kevin Chiles, Cardiac Arrest by Royce Russell, and
Letters to My Sons of
Society by Shaka Senghor. Go out and get those books. And Tamika, State of Emergency is still one of the best sellers out here. Make sure you go get that. And with that said, end to this show. We appreciate you. Make sure that you continue to make us number one. Street Politicians, number one podcast in the world. I'm not gonna always
it's
be
number
right.
one in our hearts.
No, it's
But
number
we
one.
need the people to take it to number one
Look,
on
you gotta
the
speak
chart.
it to existence.
I'm
man.
not saying that
It's
we
number
don't,
one.
but if the thing is, if people believe that it's already there,
But it's
they
already
may
there.
not push it.
I'm telling you, it's there. No.
It's
They
there.
gonna,
It's there in
people
your
wanna
heart.
watch. Listen, people want to watch who's the best, and we the best. Number one show in the world. We appreciate y'all. I'm not gonna always be right. Tamika's not gonna always be wrong. But we will both always, and I mean always and always, always, always be authentic.
Peace.